My name is Whitney. I'm 32, and until last month, I thought I had the perfect marriage. James and I built a beautiful life in Boston over 5 years together. He's brilliant with computers, I excel in marketing, and everyone called us the dream team. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our plans for the future. But one Tuesday evening, technology revealed what words had been hiding. One forgotten button on a video call shattered everything I believed about us. What I overheard in those 3 minutes made my entire body go numb. If you're watching this from somewhere in your own life where trust feels certain, remember how quickly certainty can dissolve. Where are you watching from today? Hit subscribe. And if you've ever had that gut feeling, something wasn't right. I met James at a tech conference in Chicago 7 years ago. I was representing my marketing agency, showcasing our digital campaigns for healthcare clients. He was there with his software development team presenting a new patient portal system. Our booths were directly across from each other, and I noticed him watching me during my demonstrations, not in a creepy way, but with genuine interest that made my cheeks flush whenever our eyes met. On the second day, he finally approached. "Your presentation was impressive," he said, extending his hand. "I'm James Turner." His smile reached his eyes, creating tiny laugh lines I would come to adore. I introduced myself, and somehow our professional small talk turned into a 2-hour conversation over coffee. We discovered we both grew up in New England, both loved historical documentaries, and both had a weakness for spicy food that made our friends think we were slightly crazy. What are the odds we'd meet in Chicago but live just 30 minutes apart in Massachusetts? He laughed. The coincidence felt like fate. We exchanged numbers, and he called the very next day. Our first date was at a tiny Vietnamese restaurant where we challenged each other to try increasingly spicy dishes. I remember watching him sweat through his blue button-down shirt and thinking how refreshing it was to meet someone who didn't try to appear perfect. By our third date, I knew this was different from any relationship I'd had before. James proposed 6 months later during a weekend hiking trip to the White Mountains. We reached the summit at sunrise, and as the golden light spilled across the valley below, he dropped to one knee. "Whitney, you make every view more beautiful," he said, his voice catching. "Will you marry me?" I was crying before he finished the question. We planned our wedding for the following summer, a beachside ceremony in Ogunquit, Maine. The day was perfect, cloudless blue skies meeting the deeper blue of the Atlantic. I walked down the aisle on my father's arm as 70 of our closest friends and family watched. My best friend Natalie cried harder than anyone when we exchanged vows. James promised to be my adventure partner and steady harbour. I vowed to be his biggest supporter and honest companion. We sealed it with a kiss as waves crashed behind us, nature's applause for our union. After a honeymoon in Portugal, we settled into married life. We purchased a craftsman-style home in a leafy Boston suburb with a wraparound porch where we spent summer evenings drinking wine and planning our future. Every Sunday morning, we had a tradition of making elaborate brunches together, James handling the savoury dishes, while I mastered French toast and berry compotes. We'd linger for hours over coffee reading sections of the newspaper to each other and debating everything from politics to movie endings. "This is what happiness feels like," I told Natalie over lunch one day. "It's not fireworks, it's this quiet certainty that you're exactly where you belong." For the first 3 years, we thrived. We hosted dinner parties that our friends raved about for weeks afterward. We took cooking classes, joined a wine tasting group, and volunteered at a local animal shelter. James taught me basic coding, and I helped him become a more confident public speaker for his work presentations. We complemented each other perfectly, each making the other better. James's career at Tech Solutions started taking off in our 3rd year of marriage. His work developing healthcare software interfaces gained attention, and he was assigned to increasingly important projects. I was so proud watching him succeed, even when it meant longer hours at the office. His first business trip came as a surprise, a 4-day conference in San Francisco. I missed him terribly, but welcomed him home with his favorite meal and enthusiastic attention that made him joke we should be apart more often. My own career was thriving too. I'd been promoted to senior marketing director at my agency, leading a team of 12 talented people. My campaigns for medical device companies and healthcare networks won industry awards. James always made time to attend the award ceremonies, beaming with pride as I gave acceptance speeches. As James's professional reputation grew, so did his travel schedule. What started as occasional trips became monthly journeys to different cities where his company had clients or offices. We adjusted creating routines to stay connected. He'd text me every morning with a coffee selfie and something he observed about whatever city he was in. We'd video chat each evening before bed, giving each other virtual tours of hotel rooms or updates about our days. "I hate sleeping without you," he'd say, his face slightly pixelated on my screen. "But I love that we can still see each other like this." Our friends David and Teresa called us the poster children for modern marriage, admiring how we balanced ambition and togetherness. Natalie teased us about being disgustingly in love even after years together. My parents, who had been married for 35 years, said we reminded them of their early days. Looking back, I can see small warning signs I dismissed. James started working more weekends. Our elaborate Sunday brunches became simpler, sometimes just bagels and coffee, before he headed to the office to catch up on a few things. Occasionally, he'd seem distant during our video calls, glancing at something off-screen, but I chalked it up to work stress and the natural ebb and flow of a relationship. 3 months ago, we celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary at L'Espalier, the restaurant where we'd had our rehearsal dinner. James ordered champagne and presented me with a delicate emerald bracelet that matched my eyes. "5 years with my favourite person," he toasted, clinking his glass against mine. "Here's to building our family soon." We'd been talking about starting a family, tentatively planning for the coming year. That night, we discussed names we liked and how we'd convert the guest room into a nursery. It was the last time I remember feeling completely secure in us. The changes began when James's company launched a major project upgrading Seattle Children's Hospital's entire patient management system. As lead developer, James would need to be on-site frequently, working directly with their IT team. His new schedule involved flying to Seattle every Monday morning and returning Thursday evening 3 weeks out of every month. "It's a huge opportunity," he explained, excitement lighting his features. "If this goes well, I could be looking at a director position." I supported him enthusiastically, helping him pack for that first trip, slipping notes into his suitcase that he would find throughout the week. We joked about frequent flyer miles and hotel points accumulating for a future vacation. I drove him to the airport that first Monday, kissing him goodbye at security and watching until he disappeared from view. The first few weeks of this new arrangement went smoothly. Our communication routine continued, James sending morning texts and us video chatting before bed. He'd tell me about meetings with hospital administrators, challenges with the existing system, and Seattle's perpetually rainy weather. I'd update him about my client's office politics and what show I was binge-watching without him. 5 weeks into the project, subtle shifts began. James's morning texts grew shorter, sometimes not arriving until afternoon with a brief, "Sorry, early meeting ran long." Our evening video calls became less reliable, often rescheduled or cut short. When we did connect, he seemed distracted, his eyes frequently darting away from the screen. "Is everything okay with the project?" I asked during one call, noticing the tension in his shoulders. "Just complicated stakeholder demands," he replied vaguely. "Nothing to worry about." Around this time, he changed his phone password. We had always known each other's passwords not from suspicion, but practical convenience. I discovered the change when I tried to order food delivery using his phone while mine was charging. "Why did you change your password?" I asked casually that evening. "Oh, company security policy," he answered quickly. "Everyone had to update to these complex alphanumeric codes. I can barely remember it myself." He laughed but didn't offer to share the new password. I noticed other small behaviours that seemed off character. James started placing his phone face down whenever he was home. He began taking calls in another room, his voice too low for me to hear the conversation. Our physical intimacy, once so natural and frequent, became increasingly rare. When I initiated, he often claimed exhaustion from travel or work stress. Against my better judgment, I planned a surprise visit to Seattle. I thought perhaps seeing his project firsthand might help me feel more connected to this new chapter of his career. I booked a flight and a nice hotel, imagining romantic dinners after his workday and exploring the city together on his downtime. When I called to share my exciting plan, his response chilled me. "This really isn't a good time, Whitney," he said, his voice tight. "The team is putting in 18-hour days. I'd barely see you." "I don't mind," I countered. "Even a late dinner would be nice. I miss you." "The hospital is implementing critical updates this weekend," he insisted. "I'll probably sleep at the office. Let's plan your visit for next month when things calm down." I cancelled the reservations, fighting back tears of disappointment. That night, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket while doing laundry. It was from a restaurant called Canlis, one of Seattle's most romantic and expensive dining establishments. The date was from his last trip, on a night he'd told me he had grabbed a quick sandwich at his hotel because of deadlines. The receipt showed a dinner for two, including an expensive bottle of wine. When I casually mentioned finding it, asking if he'd taken a client to dinner, he snatched it from my hand. "Just a team celebration for meeting a project milestone," he said, dismissively. I forgot all about it. I called Natalie the next day, pouring out my growing concerns. "You're being paranoid," she said kindly. "James adores you. He's probably just stressed about this massive project. Men get weird when they're under pressure." I wanted to believe her, but my stomach knotted with doubt. I began noticing more discrepancies. A credit card charge at a jewelry store I'd never received a gift from. A text notification that flashed on his screen from someone named Amanda S., with just a heart emoji. When I asked who Amanda was, he said she was a hospital IT specialist he worked with regularly. "We're all on a group text chain for the project," he explained, not meeting my eyes. I tried rebuilding our connection during his days home. I cooked elaborate meals, suggested weekend getaways to nearby Cape Cod, initiated conversations about our future family plans. James participated, but something felt performative about his engagement, as if he were reading from a script of our former happiness. In April, James missed my father's 70th birthday celebration, claiming an emergency system update couldn't be rescheduled. My family asked about him repeatedly, and each explanation felt hollow on my tongue. I caught my mother watching me with concern, though she didn't press when I assured her everything was fine. That night in bed, scrolling through social media to distract myself from my husband's absence, I saw something that stopped my breathing. A Seattle co-worker of James had posted photos from a team happy hour. In the background of one image, partially blurred but unmistakable, was James, sitting close to a woman with auburn hair, his hand on her back, in a gesture of unmistakable intimacy. I nearly called him right then, but stopped myself. What if I was misinterpreting an innocent moment? What if my insecurities were creating problems that didn't exist? I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt, attributing my unease to the natural strain of long distance and career demands. I had no idea that my world was already fracturing beneath the surface, and that within weeks a single forgotten button would reveal everything I feared and more. The day that changed everything was an ordinary Tuesday in May. James had left for Seattle the previous morning, and I'd spent Monday diving into a challenging new marketing campaign for a telemedicine platform. I worked late, ordered Thai food delivery, and fell asleep watching a documentary about deep-sea creatures. Tuesday followed my usual routine. I went for a morning run, showered, made a smoothie, and headed to the office for client meetings. Throughout the day, James sent his typical brief texts. Good morning from rainy Seattle. Hope your Wilson presentation goes well. Nothing that hinted at the seismic shift about to occur in our lives. That evening, I prepared for our scheduled 8 o'clock video call. I poured a glass of Pinot Noir changed into a comfortable Harvard sweatshirt James had given me years ago and settled on our bedroom chaise lounge with my laptop. I even applied a touch of lip gloss, a small effort to look nice, despite the distance between us. James called precisely at 8. His face appeared on-screen hotel room, visible behind him, a generic landscape painting hanging on the wall. He looked tired, hair slightly rumpled as if he'd been running his hands through it, his blue dress shirt wrinkled around the collar. Hey there, I smiled. How was your day? Busy, he replied, his eyes flickering away from the camera momentarily. The integration testing hit some snags. We had to reconfigure several database parameters. I nodded, though the technical details meant little to me. Will it affect your timeline? Shouldn't, he said, taking a sip from a hotel water glass. The team worked through lunch to get us back on track. How about your day? I launched into a description of my client presentation, the new campaign concepts, and positive feedback from my boss. As I spoke, I noticed James checking his watch twice. His responses became increasingly perfunctory, single-word acknowledgements or distracted nods. Are you okay? I asked, pausing my story. You seem preoccupied. Sorry, he said, rubbing his eyes. Just exhausted, and I need to prepare for an early strategy meeting tomorrow. Can we cut this a bit short tonight? The abrupt request stung, but I masked my disappointment. Sure, of course. Get some rest. Thanks for understanding, he said, already reaching toward his keyboard. I'll call tomorrow, usual time. Love you. Before I could respond fully, his face disappeared as he clicked to end the call. I sighed, taking a large sip of wine and staring at the now empty screen. Our conversations had been growing shorter for weeks, but this felt particularly dismissive. Then I realized something strange. The call timer was still running. The disconnect sound hadn't played. Somehow, James had failed to properly end the call. His camera had deactivated, but the connection remained open. I moved to click the end button myself, but hesitated when I heard movement from his side. The sound of a chair pushing back, footsteps. Should I speak up and let him know we were still connected? The words formed in my throat, but stalled as I heard James's voice suddenly energetic, in a way it hadn't been moments before. Hey, beautiful, just finished my call with Whitney. My blood turned to ice. James was making another call immediately after rushing to end ours. I knew I should hang up. This was an invasion of privacy, but something primal in me kept my finger from hitting the disconnect button. Yeah, she didn't suspect anything. James continued, his voice growing slightly fainter, as if he'd moved across the room. No, she's completely clueless. Thinks I'm swamped with work. A pause. He was listening to someone's response. I know. It's getting harder to keep this up, but just a few more weeks, Amanda. After the system goes live and I get the promotion, I'll tell her everything. Amanda. The name from the text messages. The woman I'd glimpsed in the background of that team photo. You're right, James said with a soft laugh that I'd once thought belonged only to our private moments. She's so trusting it almost makes this too easy. Another pause, longer this time. I've already moved most of my personal savings to the new account. After the director announcement, I'll ask for the divorce. Whitney will be blindsided, but that's not my problem. Divorce. The word echoed in my head like a gunshot. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle the sound trying to escape. The dinner reservations are set for Friday. That little place on the waterfront you love. His voice had dropped to a tender murmur I recognized from our own intimate conversations. "I can't wait to wake up next to you every morning, not just these stolen nights." I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning around me. James and this Amanda weren't just having an affair, they were planning a future together. A future that required discarding me first. "I should get some sleep," James was saying. "Big presentation tomorrow. Yes, I'll call you before bed. Love you more. Love you more." Our phrase. The words we'd whispered to each other countless times. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of James moving around the hotel room. I sat frozen, unable to process what I'd just heard, my entire body numb with shock. Then I heard a sharp intake of breath from the other end of the connection. "Shit!" James hissed. "Shit, shit, shit." He must have noticed the call was still active. The video suddenly reactivated, showing James staring at the screen with horror dawning on his face. "Whitney!" His voice cracked. "Are you there?" "Whitney." I couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only stare at his panicked expression, a confession in itself. "Whitney, I can explain." He started, desperation edging his voice. With trembling fingers, I finally pressed the disconnect button, plunging the room into silence, except for the sound of my shattered breathing. The phone began ringing immediately. James. I watched it vibrate across the nightstand, his smiling face lighting up the screen, a photo from our anniversary dinner 3 months ago. I couldn't bear to see it turning the phone face down as tears finally broke through my shock. Within seconds, text messages began flooding in. "Whitney, please answer. It's not what it sounded like. I need to explain. Please pick up. We need to talk. Whitney, don't jump to conclusions." Jump to conclusions. I had heard every word directly from his mouth. There were no conclusions to jump to, only truths to absorb. Each message notification felt like another stab wound. I finally silenced my phone entirely, curling into a ball on our bed, the bed where we had slept together for 5 years, planned our future whispered dreams to each other in the dark. My entire body shook with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere primitive inside me. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. Nausea rose in waves as fragments of what I'd heard replayed in my mind. "She's completely clueless. After the promotion, I'll ask for the divorce. That's not my problem. Love you more." I don't know how long I lay there, time losing all meaning in the face of this cataclysm. It could have been minutes or hours when I finally reached for my phone, bypassing James's 23 missed calls and dozens of messages. I called the one person I knew would come without question. "Natalie," I managed to choke out when she answered. "I need you." To her eternal credit, she asked no questions, simply said, "I'm on my way," and hung up. 20 minutes later, I heard her key in the front door, the spare we'd given her years ago for plant watering during vacations. Footsteps raced up the stairs, and then she was there, taking in my tear-ravaged face, the untouched wine glass, the phone still lighting up, with James's relentless attempts to reach me. "Oh my God, Whitney, what happened?" She rushed to the bed, gathering me in her arms like a child. The story spilled out in broken sentences, hiccuping sobs interrupting my account of what I'd overheard. Natalie's expression shifted from concern to disbelief to fury as she understood the magnitude of James's betrayal. "That lying, cheating bastard," she whispered, stroking my hair. "I'm so sorry. I'm the one who told you that you were being paranoid." "I thought I knew him," I said, fresh tears flowing. How could I have been so wrong about the person I sleep beside every night? As Natalie held me, my phone buzzed with an email notification. James switching tactics. The subject line, "Please read this, Whitney." I opened it with trembling fingers, needing to know what possible explanation he could offer. The email was long, rambling, full of contradictions. He admitted to a relationship with Amanda, but claimed it was complicated and not serious. He wrote that he cared deeply about me but had been confused about his feelings. He insisted that what I heard was taken out of context and that he never intended to hurt me. Not once did he offer a straightforward apology. Not once did he take full responsibility. Instead, he subtly shifted blame, mentioning how our growing apart had left him vulnerable and how Amanda had been just a friend until things got confusing. "He's gaslighting you," Natalie said, reading over my shoulder. Classic cheater moves: minimize, rationalize, blame shift. She was right. Even now, faced with irrefutable evidence, James couldn't be honest. I felt a flicker of anger sparking through my devastation. It gave me just enough strength to text back a single line: "Do not come home. I need space." His response was immediate: "I'm already at the airport. We need to talk face to face." The thought of seeing him, of looking into the eyes that had lied to me for months, sent me into a panic. "I can't see him," I told Natalie. "Not tonight. Not like this." "You don't have to," she assured me. "You can stay at my place, or I can stay here with you and run interference." Before I could decide, my phone lit up with a call from an unknown Seattle number. Instinct made me answer. "Whitney," a woman's voice, unfamiliar yet instantly recognizable by context. "This is Amanda. Amanda Sinclair. We need to talk." The audacity stole my breath. "No," I managed before ending the call, then blocking the number with shaking hands. Natalie stayed the night, sleeping beside me like we were teenagers at a sleepover, except I couldn't sleep at all. I lay awake, cataloguing every suspicious incident from the past 6 months, seeing them now with painful clarity. The late-night calls, the changed password, the discouragement of my Seattle visit, the declining intimacy, the restaurant receipt, all puzzle pieces that now formed a devastating picture. I spent hours examining our photos on social media, searching James's expression for signs I might have missed clues to his duplicity. In some recent images, I could now see a remoteness in his eyes that I'd attributed to photo timing, but now recognized as emotional withdrawal. Around 5 in the morning, I heard the front door open. James had returned earlier than his usual Thursday evening arrival. Natalie squeezed my hand in the silent support as his footsteps moved through the house below, hesitating at the bottom of the stairs. "Whitney," he called softly. "Are you awake? Can we talk?" I remained silent, frozen under the covers. After a moment, his footsteps retreated to the guest bedroom downstairs. The confrontation was inevitable, but at least I had a few hours to prepare. As dawn broke, casting soft pink light through our bedroom windows, I made a decision. I would not break down in front of him. I would not beg for explanations or plead for our marriage. I would face him with whatever dignity I could muster and demand the full truth, not his edited version designed to minimize his guilt. By 7, I'd showered and dressed in my favorite blue dress, applied minimal makeup to disguise my sleepless night, and asked Natalie to give us privacy. "Are you sure?" she asked, concerned. "I can stay." "I need to do this alone," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "But stay close to your phone." After she left, I went downstairs, following the smell of coffee to the kitchen. James stood at the counter, still in yesterday's rumpled clothes, dark circles under his eyes. He looked up when I entered, relief and trepidation crossing his face. "Whitney," he said my name, a plea on his lips. "Thank you for talking to me." "I'm not here to talk," I replied, my voice foreign to my own ears. "I'm here to listen. No more lies, James. No more half-truths or minimizing. I want to know everything, starting with how long you've been sleeping with Amanda Sinclair." James flinched at my directness, setting down his coffee mug with an unsteady hand. For a moment, he looked like he might attempt another denial, but something in my expression must have conveyed the futility of further deception. 6 months, he admitted, his eyes dropping to the kitchen island between us. It started during the project kickoff in November. 6 months. Half a year of lies, including our anniversary dinner Christmas, with my family Valentine's Day when he'd sent roses to my office. How? The question emerged as barely more than a whisper. James sighed, running his hand through his hair. She's the lead IT specialist at the hospital. We worked closely together from the beginning. It started as just a professional relationship, then drinks after work with the team, then... He trailed off. Then you decided our marriage wasn't worth honouring, I finished for him. The kitchen felt too small, suddenly the walls of our home closing in. Keep going. It wasn't planned, Whitney. You have to believe that. His tone held a desperate edge. Amanda and I connected intellectually first. She understands my work in a way that... He stopped, seeming to realise this comparison wouldn't help his case. In a way that I don't, I supplied. Because I'm just a marketing person who doesn't understand your brilliant technical mind, right? That's not what I meant. He backpedaled. It's just that we spent so much time together on the project, 18-hour days sometimes. It created an intensity. And somewhere during those intense days, you forgot you had a wife. The calm in my voice surprised even me, a thin veneer over volcanic rage and hurt. James paced the kitchen, his composure cracking. I was going to tell you after the project wrapped up, after the director promotion came through. How convenient for you. I crossed my arms, physically holding myself together. And when exactly were you planning to mention the new bank account? Or the waterfront dinner reservations? Or that you've been telling another woman you love her using our phrase? His face paled. You heard all of that. Every word, I confirmed, including that my pain isn't your problem. I didn't mean that, he insisted. I was just talking. People say things they don't mean. No, James. People say things they don't mean for others to hear. The distinction hung between us. How far have you taken this? Are you moving in with her? Have you been looking at places together? His silence answered before his words could. She has a condo overlooking Puget Sound. I've stayed there most nights in Seattle for the past few months. The casual admission of shared domesticity with another woman hit harder than I expected. While I'd been sleeping alone in our marital bed, missing him, he'd been playing house with Amanda. So the hotel room I've been video chatting you in, the company still pays for it, he admitted. I go there for our calls, then usually head to her place afterward. Each revelation peeled back another layer of deception. The choreography required for this double life was staggering. How many lies had he told? How many details had he needed to track to maintain his fiction? Did you ever feel guilty? I asked, genuinely curious if the man I married had completely vanished. James sat heavily at the kitchen counter, shoulders slumping. Of course I did. Every day. I never wanted to hurt you, Whitney. And yet hurting me was a necessary component of your happiness, I observed. You can't have seriously believed I would discover your affair and infidelity and respond with, no problem, James, you go be happy. I thought, he hesitated, I thought we'd grown apart naturally, that maybe you sensed it too, that maybe you'd be sad but understand that sometimes relationships run their course. The delusion in his statement was almost impressive. We hadn't grown apart, James. You pulled away to make room for her. There's a difference. I leaned against the refrigerator, needing its solid support. When did you decide you wanted a divorce? January, he admitted. After the holidays, I realised my feelings for Amanda weren't going away, and that it wasn't fair to either of you to continue pretending. Yet, you continued pretending for 4 more months. The timeline aligned with his increased emotional distance after Christmas. You discussed having children with me 3 months ago, knowing you were planning to leave. He had the grace to look ashamed. That night was complicated. I still care about you, Whitney. Part of me wondered if I could recommit to our marriage, if those feelings for you would return stronger than what I felt for Amanda. Don't, my voice hardened. Don't you dare make this about your noble, emotional struggle. You wanted security while you figured things out. You wanted to keep me as a backup plan while you tested whether Amanda was worth leaving for. James stood suddenly, frustration flashing across his face. It wasn't like that. This isn't easy for me either. Get out. The words emerged with surprising force. What? Get out of our house, I repeated. Pack what you need for now and leave. I can't look at you another minute. Whitney, be reasonable. This is my home too. We need to discuss practical matters, finances, the house. Not today, we don't, I cut him off. You've had 6 months to plan your exit. I've had less than 12 hours to process that my entire marriage is a lie. You can give me the courtesy of space. His expression hardened, the mask of remorse slipping to reveal irritation beneath. Fine, I'll go to a hotel, but we'll need to talk about next steps soon. I've already accepted the director position in Seattle. It starts next month. Of course he had. His new life was already arranged, just waiting for him to discard the old one, discard me. Congratulations, I said, the word acid on my tongue. I'm sure you and Amanda will be very happy in your director-level condo with the Puget Sound view. James went upstairs without responding. I heard drawers opening, closet doors, sliding, the sounds of our shared life being divided. 20 minutes later, he returned with a large suitcase and duffel bag. He paused at the kitchen doorway, looking suddenly uncertain. I never meant for any of this to happen, he offered lamely. But you made sure it did, I replied. You made hundreds of small choices that led here. Own that much at least. He nodded slowly. I'll have my lawyer contact you next week. The casual mention of lawyers, of how far along he was in this process, sent a fresh wave of pain through me. Goodbye, James. As the front door closed behind him, I slid down against the refrigerator to the kitchen floor. In the silence of our home, now just my home, I finally allowed myself to fall completely apart. For the first time in my 15-year professional career, I called in sick the next day. The thought of sitting in meetings, presenting campaign concepts, or engaging in office small talk while my personal life imploded was unbearable. My boss, Angela, asked no questions when I called, just told me to take whatever time I needed. These things happen, Whitney, she said kindly, though she had no idea what things had actually occurred. The work will be here when you get back. The day stretched before me, empty and terrifying. I wandered our home like a ghost, noticing for the first time how many photos of James and me adorned the walls and shelves. Our wedding portrait in the hallway, vacation snapshots from Portugal, Quebec City, and the California coast, holiday celebrations with family. Each image now felt like evidence of an elaborate con, a visual record of what I thought we were building together. My body seemed to be processing the trauma physically. I couldn't eat, the mere thought of food triggering waves of nausea. Sleep came in brief, restless intervals, interrupted by dreams where I relived the phone call revelation or imagined scenes of James and Amanda together. I lost 4 pounds in that first week, my clothes hanging loosely on my frame. James continued his campaign of explanation and justification via text and email, each message revealing more details that only deepened my pain. He admitted he and Amanda had discussed their future extensively, that he had looked at Seattle real estate listings, that they had planned a vacation to Hawaii for. After our divorce was finalized, each new piece of information confirmed how thoroughly I had been replaced, how completely he had moved on while pretending to be fully present in our marriage. I finally blocked his number, unable to bear the constant intrusions. He switched to email, which I filtered to a separate folder I could check when I felt emotionally strong enough to handle more revelations. The process of telling friends and family felt like reliving the trauma repeatedly. My parents drove down from Vermont the day after I called them, arriving with food I couldn't eat and support I desperately needed. I never liked how much he traveled. My father confessed his protective instincts flaring now, that he didn't need to maintain a cordial relationship with his son-in-law. No job should take a man away from his wife that often. My mother was quieter, holding me through tears that seemed inexhaustible, murmuring that I would survive this, that I was stronger than I knew. I didn't feel strong. I felt hollowed out, a shell of the confident woman I had been just days earlier. Telling Natalie had been the first step. Telling my parents, painful but necessary. Telling our mutual friends proved excruciating in different ways. David and Teresa invited me to dinner, clearly expecting a story about temporary marital difficulties. Their shock when I revealed the full extent of James's betrayal was almost comical, if anything could be funny in that moment. But you were the perfect couple, Teresa kept repeating, unable to reconcile the James she knew with his actions. Apparently not, I replied, pushing pasta around my plate, my appetite still absent. The reactions varied. Some friends responded with appropriate outrage and unconditional support. Others awkwardly suggested marriage counseling, as if infidelity and divorce planning could be resolved through therapy. A few, particularly James's college friends, grew distant, clearly uncertain where their loyalties should lie. The isolation grew as my social circle adjusted to this seismic shift. A week after the discovery, I forced myself to return to work, needing the distraction and routine. I applied extra makeup to conceal the dark circles under my eyes, wore a bright blouse to distract from my weight loss, and practiced a neutral expression in the mirror. I can do this, I told my reflection, 1 hour at a time. The facade cracked during my first client meeting when someone innocently asked about James. The simple question, "How's James liking the Seattle project?" sent me rushing to the bathroom where I vomited bile and sobbed in a stall for 20 minutes before composing myself enough to return. As the days passed, I began investigating our finances, discovering more evidence of James's careful exit planning. He had indeed opened a separate account 3 months earlier, gradually transferring personal funds. He had applied for a new credit card in just his name. He had even spoken with a real estate agent about our home's value, apparently weighing whether to fight for it or let me keep it in exchange for other assets. The methodical nature of his preparations felt like a second betrayal. While I had been planning our future family, he had been planning his escape. 2 weeks after Discovery Day, James requested a meeting to discuss practical matters. I agreed to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop equidistant from our home and his temporary hotel. I arrived early, securing a corner table and ordering a tea I knew I wouldn't drink but needed something to occupy my hands. James arrived looking annoyingly well-rested and put together, the stress of deception apparently lifted from his shoulders. He slid into the chair across from me, placing a folder on the table between us. "Thank you for meeting me," he began formally, as if we were business associates rather than spouses in the middle of catastrophe. "I've prepared some documents outlining a proposed division of assets." No, "how are you?" No acknowledgement of the devastation he'd caused, just straight to business. "You've been busy," I observed, not touching the folder. "I thought it would be easier to have a starting point for discussion," he replied. "My lawyer suggested a clean break would be best for both of us." "Your lawyer," I repeated, "the one you already had before I knew our marriage was over. That lawyer, he had the decency to look uncomfortable." "Whitney, I know you're hurt and angry, but we need to move forward practically. Forward to your new life with Amanda," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "How is she, by the way? Enjoying her role as the other woman?" "That's not fair," he protested. "She's not some homewrecker. Our connection was unexpected and genuine. So genuine you hid it for 6 months while making plans behind my back," I countered. "You know what would have been fair, James, telling me you were unhappy, telling me you had feelings for someone else before acting on them, going to counselling. Any of those would have been fair." He sighed clearly, having anticipated my emotional response and finding it tiresome. The past can't be changed. I'm trying to make this transition as smooth as possible. How considerate of you. James opened the folder, apparently determined to stick to his agenda. I'm proposing you keep the house and I'll keep my retirement accounts. The difference in equity would be offset by... As he continued outlining his clinical dissection of our shared life, I found my mind drifting. Across the coffee shop, a young couple sat with their heads close together, laughing over something on a phone screen. Their casual intimacy, the unthinking way they occupied each other's space, sent a pang through my chest. That had been James and me once. When had we lost that? Or had it always been an illusion on my part? Whitney, are you listening? James's voice pulled me back. No, I admitted. I'm watching that couple over there and remembering when we used to look at each other that way. He glanced at the couple, then back to me, discomfort evident. People change, relationships evolve. Or devolve, I added. Tell me something honestly, James. No spin, no minimizing. Were you ever going to tell me if I hadn't overheard that call? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He hesitated, then nodded. Yes, after the director announcement next week. I had it planned. And if the promotion hadn't come through? Another pause. I don't know, he admitted finally. Probably would have waited longer. At least it was honest. Small comfort. The conversation continued, James reviewing his proposed settlement, while I nodded mechanically, unable to focus on numbers and assets. When the emotional wounds were still so raw, I agreed to have my own lawyer review the documents, eager to escape the surreal normalcy of discussing property division with the man who had shattered my trust. As we prepared to leave, James hesitated. I am sorry, Whitney. Not just for you finding out that way, but for hurting you. That was never my intention. Intentions don't matter much against actions, I replied, gathering my purse. You chose this path step by step. Own it. I left without looking back, my composure lasting until I reached my car. There, in the privacy of tinted windows, I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes of tears before driving home. The following week brought a new torment. While grocery shopping at Whole Foods, turning down the wine aisle, I came face to face with James and a woman I instantly recognized as Amanda. Her auburn hair and delicate features matched the partial glimpse I'd seen in social media photos. They were laughing, her hand casually resting on his arm in a gesture of familiar intimacy. A shopping basket between them filled with ingredients for what was clearly a planned dinner together. The domestic scene, so ordinary, yet so painful in context, froze me in place. James noticed me first, his laughter dying as our eyes met. Amanda followed his gaze, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition to discomfort as she realized who I was. For an excruciating moment, we all stood motionless, trapped in this unplanned confrontation. I noticed absurd details. Amanda was shorter than me. She wore a Seattle Seahawks t-shirt. James had a new haircut. They were buying the same Cabernet he and I used to enjoy together. Whitney? James finally broke the silence, his voice strained. I didn't expect to see you here. Evidently, I managed my voice, sounding distant to my own ears. Amanda shifted awkwardly, clearly uncertain of her role in this tableau. I should give you two a moment, she murmured, moving to step away. Don't bother, I said, finding unexpected strength. I was just leaving. I abandoned my half-filled cart, needing escape more than groceries. As I hurried toward the exit, I heard James call my name, but I didn't turn back. In my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, the full impact hit me. James hadn't just moved on emotionally, he had brought her here to our community, our stores, the places we had frequented as a couple. That night, alone in our bedroom, I reached my lowest point. Scrolling through old photos on my laptop, I found one from our first anniversary, James feeding me cake on the same plates we still used for special occasions. His eyes in the photo held such obvious adoration it seemed impossible that same man had methodically planned to leave me for another woman. Had it all been a lie? every kiss, every whispered promise, every shared dream. The weight of this question crushed me until breathing itself became an effort. For one dark moment, I wondered if disappearing might be easier than rebuilding from these ruins. The thought frightened me enough to call Natalie, who came over immediately. "I can't do this," I told her as she sat beside me on the bedroom floor where she'd found me. "I can't imagine existing in a world where this happened, where he's happily moving on while I'm shattered." "You can and you will," she said firmly, taking my hands. "Not tonight, not tomorrow, but eventually. And I'll be here until eventually arrives." She stayed the night again, and in the morning insisted I call my doctor. "This isn't just sadness, Whitney. This is trauma, and you need support." Her words penetrated my fog of despair. This wasn't just a bad breakup. It was the sudden, violent dissolution of the future I had planned, the identity I had built as part of a loving couple. I made the call, scheduling appointments with both my primary doctor and a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma. That week, I nearly lost a major client account. After blanking during a presentation, my mind suddenly flooding with images of James and Amanda shopping for wine. My boss, Angela, pulled me into her office afterward. "What's going on, Whitney?" she asked directly. "This isn't like you." The kindness in her voice broke through the professional mask I'd been struggling to maintain. I told her everything, the words pouring out in a jumbled tear-streaked confession of my personal collapse. Instead of the professional disappointment I expected, Angela came around her desk and hugged me. "My first husband did almost the exact same thing," she revealed. "Different details, same betrayal. I know exactly what you're going through." Her understanding was a lifeline. She adjusted my workload temporarily, partnered me with a supportive colleague on major presentations, and offered flexible hours for therapy appointments. "You'll get through this," she promised, "and you'll be stronger for it, though." That's cold comfort now. I clung to these assurances from people who had survived similar devastation, needing proof that forward movement was possible when I could barely imagine the next day, let alone a healed future. My first session with Dr. Morgan marked a subtle turning point. A petite woman with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. She created a space where my pain could exist without judgment or platitudes. "Betrayal trauma is different from ordinary grief," she explained during our initial meeting. "The person you would normally turn to for comfort is the source of your pain. That creates a unique type of psychological injury. For the first time since the revelation, I felt truly understood, not just sympathized with, but comprehended at a fundamental level." Dr. Morgan didn't try to rush my healing or suggest I look on the bright side. She validated the magnitude of what had happened. "Your reaction isn't excessive or dramatic," she assured me. "It's proportional to the deception you experienced." With her guidance, I began establishing boundaries with James. All communication would go through email, only focused exclusively on divorce proceedings. If he sent personal messages, explanations, or justifications, I would not respond. I informed him of this boundary clearly and enforced it rigorously, creating a small sense of control in the chaos. Around this time, I joined a support group for people dealing with infidelity, meeting weekly in a church basement not far from our home. The stories I heard there ranged from briefly straying spouses who sought forgiveness to elaborate double lives maintained for decades. While the circumstances varied, the emotional impact was strikingly similar. The questioning of reality, the crippled trust, the brutal reassessment of cherished memories. "I thought I was losing my mind," said Monica, a group member whose husband had maintained 2 separate families in different states for 8 years. "Turns out I was just living in his fiction." Her words resonated deeply. James had created a narrative in which our marriage was naturally fading, while his connection with Amanda was organic and inevitable. He'd curated my perception, limiting my access to reality while building his exit strategy. As June began, I made my first proactive change, something small but symbolic. I made an appointment at an upscale salon and had my long brown hair, which James had always loved, cut into a sophisticated bob that framed my face in a way that felt fresh and distinctly mine. "I hardly recognize myself," I told the stylist as she finished. "That can be a good thing sometimes," she replied with a knowing smile. New chapter, new look. The physical change sparked something. That weekend, I began reclaiming our bedroom. Moving furniture, replacing the bedding James and I had chosen together with new linens in colours I loved, but he had always vetoed as too bold. I took down wedding photos and stored them in the attic, not ready to discard that history, but needing it out of my daily sight. At work, I threw myself into a challenging new pharmaceutical campaign, working longer hours, but finding unexpected solace in creative problem-solving. My focus gradually returned, along with my professional confidence. Angela noticed the shift, assigning me to lead our team's pitch for a major new client. "You're coming back to yourself," she observed one evening as we worked late preparing presentation materials. Stronger version too. Reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during my marriage revealed another insight. I had gradually trimmed my social circle to accommodate James's preferences. I resumed monthly dinners with college friends he had found too dramatic. I joined a weekend hiking group he had dismissed as taking too much time away from us. In therapy, Dr. Morgan helped me recognize patterns in my marriage I had been blind to while living them. "James created dependencies," she pointed out. "Notice how many decisions deferred to his preferences, how many of your relationships were mediated through him." The divorce proceedings moved forward with cold efficiency. James's lawyer was clearly under instructions to resolve matters quickly, allowing him to start his new Seattle life unencumbered. My own attorney, a steely woman in her 50s, who specialized in high-conflict divorces, advised me not to capitulate to speed. "He's in a hurry," she observed. "That gives us leverage. Don't let his timetable dictate your compensation." Following her counsel, I took a hard line on financial settlement terms. If James wanted his freedom quickly, he would need to be generous. The house would remain mine, along with a significant portion of our investment portfolio and additional cash settlement. His eagerness to move forward worked in my favour, resulting in terms far better than his initial proposal. One morning in July, I received the divorce papers, requiring my signature. The manila envelope sat on my kitchen counter all day, a physical manifestation of my marriage's end. That evening, after a glass of wine and a long call with Natalie, I finally opened it, the legal language transforming something once sacred into a dissolving business arrangement. My reaction surprised me. Instead of the fresh wave of grief I expected, I felt an odd relief. Signing these papers meant closing a chapter written in lies. It meant no longer being legally bound to someone who had betrayed my trust so completely. With steady hands, I signed my name on the indicated lines, officially beginning the process of becoming Whitney Carter, single woman, rather than Whitney Turner James's wife. The next day, I did something that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. I sold my wedding and engagement rings to a jeweler downtown, using the substantial sum to book a solo trip to Italy for September. The decision to travel alone to a country we had always talked about visiting together felt both terrifying and exhilarating. "I've never travelled internationally by myself," I confessed to Dr. Morgan during our session. "That's exactly why it's perfect," she replied. "You're not just seeing Italy, you're meeting the woman who can navigate the world on her own terms." As July turned to August, James completed his move to Seattle, the last of his belongings removed from the house, during a day I deliberately spent with Natalie at a spa. I returned to a home that felt lighter, unburdened by his presence and the weight of our shared possessions. I changed the locks, The security code, the Wi-Fi password, small acts of reclamation that collectively announce this space as exclusively my sin. I painted the dining room a deep teal colour. James had vetoed 3 times, hung art that spoke to me rather than complementing our shared aesthetic, and rearranged furniture to better suit my preferences. At work, my renewed focus paid off with the successful acquisition of the client I had pitched to. Angela called me into her office after the contract was signed. "I'm promoting you to creative director," she announced without preamble. "You've earned it, especially considering what you've powered through personally." The recognition of my professional value provided a counterbalance to the personal rejection I had experienced. I threw myself into the new role mentoring younger team members and finding unexpected satisfaction in helping others develop their talents. As summer waned, I attended a gathering at David and Teresa's home, aware that several mutual friends who still maintained relationships with James would be present. I nearly cancelled, twice anxiety mounting as I imagined their pity or awkward attempts to avoid mentioning him. Natalie insisted I go. "You can't hide forever. These are your friends too." I chose my outfit carefully, a sundress that highlighted my figure now returning to its healthy weight as my appetite gradually normalized. I styled my new haircut with extra care, applied makeup that emphasized my eyes, and wore the delicate gold earrings I had bought myself as a divorce present. Walking into the gathering required courage. I wasn't sure I possessed, but the reception surprised me. Friends greeted me warmly, complimenting my appearance, asking about my promotion and upcoming Italy trip. No one mentioned James until Teresa pulled me aside near the dessert table. "He's not doing as well as he expected in Seattle," she said quietly. "David spoke with him last week. Apparently, things with Amanda are already getting complicated." I waited for satisfaction to flood me at this news, for vindictive pleasure to emerge. Instead, I felt a curious detachment, as if she were discussing characters from a book I had read long ago. "I hope he figures things out," I said, surprising myself with the sincerity in my voice. "But it's not my concern anymore." Teresa studied my face. "You really mean that, don't you?" "I really do." I realized his happiness or unhappiness belongs to him now, not me. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that James no longer occupied the central place in my emotional landscape. He was becoming peripheral, a significant but closed chapter rather than an ongoing narrative. The evening marked another milestone in my recovery. I laughed genuinely for the first time in months, danced when music started playing on the patio, and exchanged phone numbers with new friends Teresa had invited. I left feeling connected to the world in a way that had seemed impossible during those dark early weeks. A few days later, grocery shopping at the same Whole Foods, where I had encountered James and Amanda, a man in the produce section asked me about selecting ripe avocados. The casual conversation flowed easily into more personal territory, his interest evident in the questions he asked about my weekend plans and favourite local restaurants. When Brian asked for my number, my first instinct was to decline to explain I wasn't ready for dating. Instead, I heard myself saying, "I'd like that, but I should tell you, I'm just finalising a divorce. I'm moving carefully." His response settled something in me. "Moving carefully sounds wise," he said. "How about we start with coffee next week? No pressure, just conversation." I agreed, not from loneliness or a need to replace James, but from a genuine curiosity about this new person and the woman I was becoming who could have coffee with a stranger without expectations or fears. Life was reshaping itself around me, or perhaps I was reshaping myself around a new reality. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed from an all-consuming force into something I carried with me, acknowledging but no longer defined by. 6 months after discovering James's betrayal, I stood in the customs line at Rome's Fiumicino airport, passport in hand, travelling solo for the first time in my adult life. The journey that had once seemed an impossible challenge now felt like a victory lap. a celebration of my rebuilt independence. The months since signing the divorce papers had brought continuous change, both external and internal. The final decree had arrived in late August, officially ending my marriage and legally returning me to my maiden name. Seeing Whitney Carter on the document produced an unexpected surge of reclamation, as if I were retrieving not just my name, but the self that existed before James. My newly decorated home had become a true sanctuary, filled with colours, textures, and objects that reflected only my taste and preferences. The guest room that James and I had once designated as a future nursery now served as my home office, a space for creative work and personal projects. What had initially felt like the death of future plans had gradually transformed into the birth of new possibilities. My professional life flourished under the responsibilities of my creative director position. The team I led had secured 2 additional major accounts, and I had been featured in a marketing industry publication highlighting women leaders in healthcare advertising. The external validation mattered less than the internal satisfaction of excelling at work I found meaningful. Relationships shifted and realigned as I moved forward. Some friendships strengthened in the crucible of crisis. Natalie's unwavering support cementing our bond into something familial rather than merely social. Other connections faded naturally, particularly with couples who had been primarily James's friends, or who found my new independence unsettling to their own relationship narratives. New people entered my life too, bringing perspectives unclouded by knowledge of who I had been in my marriage. The coffee with Brian had led to occasional casual dates, his respect for my boundaries creating a space where I could practice trust again without pressure. We weren't a couple, but his presence in my life reminded me that connection remained possible. My parents visited monthly, our relationship deepening as I allowed them to see my vulnerability, rather than presenting the polished surface I had maintained during my marriage. "You remind me of myself at your age," my mother confided during one visit. "After my first marriage ended, I found parts of myself I never knew existed." Italy represented the culmination of this half-year journey, a gift to myself purchased with the literal symbols of my former marriage. As I navigated the bustling airport, then the taxi to my boutique hotel in Trastevere, I felt a thrill of accomplishment with each successful interaction. The hotel room was tiny but charming, with a wrought-iron balcony overlooking a cobblestone street lined with cafes and shops. I unpacked methodically, hanging the clothes I had selected with care, arranging my toiletries in the compact bathroom, placing my journal on the small desk by the window. That first evening in Rome, I dined alone at a neighbourhood trattoria, ordering in my rudimentary Italian and savouring each bite of cacio e pepe and each sip of local wine. The waiter, an older man with kind eyes, seemed to recognise something in my solitary state that went beyond typical tourism. "È la prima volta a Roma?" he asked. "Is this your first time in Rome?" "È la prima volta da sola," I responded. "It's my first time alone." He nodded with understanding, returning minutes later with a tiny glass of limoncello. "Per coraggio," for courage, he explained with a gentle smile. The simple human connection, the recognition of both my aloneness and my courage, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I thanked him, raised the glass in a silent toast to myself, and felt the sweet, burning liquid warm my throat and chest. Over the next 10 days, I explored Rome, Florence, and Venice at my own pace, making decisions based solely on my interests and energy. I visited museums when they opened to avoid crowds, lingered over lunches, watching local life unfold around me, and changed plans on impulse when something caught my attention. In Florence, I met a Canadian woman travelling alone after her retirement, her husband of 40 years having died the previous year. We shared dinner one evening, comparing our journeys of loss and rediscovery. The hardest part, she confided, was learning to make decisions without considering someone else's preferences. After decades of compromise, I'd forgotten what I actually liked. Her observation resonated deeply. How many choices had I deferred to James? How many preferences had I suppressed or modified to accommodate his stronger opinions, from restaurants to vacation destinations to the colour of our living room walls? I had gradually conceded territory in ways so subtle I hadn't recognised the pattern until it was illuminated by his absence. On my final day in Venice, wandering the narrow streets away from tourist areas, I found myself in a small piazza where an elderly man sold watercolour paintings from a portable easel. One piece captured my attention immediately, a solitary figure in a red coat standing on a bridge face, turned toward the open water posture, suggesting not loneliness, but contemplation and possibility. As I purchased the painting carefully rolled for transport home, the artist asked in halting English if it was a gift. Yes, I replied. For myself. He nodded approvingly. Best kind of gift, from you who sees yourself truly to you who receives with joy. The wisdom in his broken English struck me as profound. For years, I had seen myself primarily through the lens of my relationship with James. Now, I was learning to see myself directly without mediation, through someone else's perception or needs. Returning home from Italy, I hung the watercolour painting in my bedroom, where I would see it each morning, a reminder of the woman who had travelled alone, navigated unfamiliar cities, made connections across language barriers, and found joy in her own company. 2 weeks after my return, I attended a charity gala for the hospital foundation my agency represented. Wearing a navy blue gown that made me feel both elegant and strong, I mingled comfortably with clients and colleagues, no longer feeling the absence of a +1 as a deficiency. During the dinner, I found myself seated beside David, who attended representing his investment firm. Without James as our connection, I had seen him infrequently in recent months. I ran into James last week, he mentioned, cautiously watching my reaction. I was in Seattle for a conference. In earlier months, this statement would have triggered an immediate emotional response. Now I felt only mild curiosity. How did he seem? David hesitated, then opted for honesty. Not great, honestly. The director position isn't what he expected, more politics than innovation, and things with Amanda ended about a month ago. The information landed without the emotional impact I might once have anticipated. Neither satisfaction nor sorrow emerged, just a detached acknowledgement. I'm sorry to hear he's struggling, I said sincerely. Everyone deserves happiness, even people who make terrible choices. David studied me with surprise. That's generous considering what he put you through. It's not generosity, I corrected gently. It's freedom. His happiness or unhappiness no longer affects mine. Later that evening, arriving home to my peaceful house, I realized how true those words had become. The divorce had severed not just our legal bonds, but the emotional tethers that had allowed James's actions and moods to determine my well-being. The pain he had caused remained part of my story, but it no longer defined my daily experience or future expectations. My therapy sessions with Dr. Morgan had decreased to bi-weekly meetings, focused less on healing trauma and more on building resilience and exploring what I wanted in this next chapter of life. During our most recent session, she had asked a question that continued to resonate. Who are you becoming through this experience? The question invited me to see my journey not just as recovery from betrayal, but as transformation into someone new, someone who incorporated but transcended the woman I had been before and during my marriage. That night, writing in the journal I had kept faithfully since the discovery day, I reflected on the lessons of the past 6 months. Lessons earned through pain but valuable beyond measure. I learned to trust my instincts, those quiet internal alarms I had silenced in favor of accepting James's explanations and rationalizations. I learned that self-worth must come from within, not from another's validation or presence in my life. I learned that endings, even the most painful ones, can become beginnings if approached with courage and honesty. I learned the power of choosing myself not from selfishness, but from authentic self-respect and care. And perhaps most importantly, I learned that resilience isn't about never breaking, but about how we gather the fragments and create something new from what remains. The Whitney who had existed before Discovery Day was gone but not lost. She had evolved into someone stronger, more self-aware, more capable of genuine connection because she now understood both the fragility and resilience of the human heart, including her own. The future remained unwritten. Perhaps it would include new love someday entered with eyes wide open and boundaries firmly established. Perhaps it would involve career advancement, creative pursuits, or adventures I couldn't yet imagine. The uncertainty that once would have terrified me now felt like spaciousness room to grow in directions of my own choosing. What happened with James no longer defined me. It had shaped me certainly, as all significant experiences do. But the shaping was my own work, my own choice to transform pain into wisdom rather than bitterness. As I finished writing and closed my journal, I felt profound gratitude, not for the betrayal which remained inexcusable, but for the woman I had become through surviving it. The husband who forgot to end our call had unwittingly given me the gift of truth, painful as it was, and from that truth I had built a life more authentic and free than the one built on his deceptions. Have you ever had a moment where betrayal turned into an unexpected blessing, a time when what felt like an ending became the doorway to something better? Share your story in the comments. I would be honored to hear how you found strength in life's painful turns. And if you're in the middle of your own storm right now, please know that healing is possible. Subscribe for more stories of resilience, and remember that sometimes our greatest growth comes from our deepest wounds. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may your own path lead you to peace, no matter what challenges you face along the way.